Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Space for Life. If you're a longtime listener of Space for Life, just a few months ago, towards the end of 2025, you probably enjoyed just a phenomenal episode with my guest again today, Keith McCurdy, when we talked about really one of the most challenging subjects that so many of us deal with, and that's how to raise sturdy kids. And Keith, this is kind of his specialty, some wisdom that he's gained over the years. And as I listened to him talk, I kind of felt this welling up within me that wondered, with all of the places that I fell short in that the crux of the issue was, am I a sturdy adult when it comes down to it? Because I think it takes a sturdy adult to raise a sturdy child. And so I asked Keith to come back on and kind of step back before the raising of the sturdy child to talk about what it means to be a sturdy adult. What are the characteristics and practices and habits? So we have so much to talk about, and you're going to absolutely love this. And I think it's going to be, a challenge and hopefully an encouragement to each one of us. So Keith, I'm just thrilled. I've been waiting, kind of bated breath, to have you back on Space for Life to talk about this, because I've got so many questions and so much actually I really want to learn.
Good. Well, I'm glad to be back. I'm sorry it seems like my schedule didn't allow us to do it sooner, so I'm glad we have the chance to do it now. And I think it's a great question. How are we sturdy adults? Because it's interesting. We talked last time about sturdy kids, and most of my work when I work with children is actually with the parents, really getting them to function healthy to make it easier to then build sturdy kids. So I think it's a wonderful thing for us to discuss.
Well, great. And I think that what we're going to find is that while it has everything to do with your ability to raise sturdy kids, it actually has everything to do with your ability to enjoy and have fulfillment and impact in life. So it flows into every area. So I'm really excited to have you on the episode. And people may want to go back, even perhaps before listening to this, and listen to the other episode on raising sturdy kids. But real briefly, we went into a little bit more depth the first time. If you could just kind of share with people again how you ended up on this path of really kind of this specializing, this unique message really in our day and culture about sturdiness.
Yeah. Well, no, I think I'm not really sure how I got here, to be completely honest, but I guess that, I can explain it this way. I've been in the field of mental health for, now about 39 years, coming on 40 years. And in that time, I've worked with tens of thousands of families, all ages of children, all different scenarios of parenting, as well as individuals. And the path or the pattern I have seen year after year, being in it a couple decades now, or several decades now, is what seems to be children that are growing more and more fragile. And it's interesting. We're now seeing young adults, and I think many of us can relate to this, that we see as more and more fragile, more easily offended, more easily thrown off, more easily insulted, struggling more with the idea that sometimes life is not comfortable, it's difficult, it's hard. And so I've seen this pattern over the years. I've really looked into and reflected on, when did we have the healthiest children? And it's interesting because you go back several generations to the 50s and the 40s, and you look at when we were raising children that really were functional adults by 13, had hardly any levels of anxiety and depression, functioned very well, and really generated some of the greatest generation that we've seen even before the 50s. And what's common to them is the reality that we onboarded them to life very early. As soon as they were functional, right around the age of 2, that's when children are functional, they have fine and gross motor skill. As soon as they were functional, we began onboarding them with obligation of life. We said, you're not a cruise passenger, you're part of the crew. And we're going to teach you how to function in every way that we function and raise you up to be capable, sturdy. And it's amazing when we did that, and when we see that today, granted it's smaller percentages, we see the healthiest, sturdiest, most capable, most confident children and adults. And so really it's that idea of how do we view what prompts growth? We've been overwhelmed in the last couple decades with a lot of psychological mindset, humanistic mindset, that it's about comfort. Keep our children happy, keep our children comfortable. The problem with that is
self-esteem.
Well, the self-esteem movement. Everybody gets a plastic trophy. They're all told how great they are just for showing up. What we know from that is the more we overinflate self-esteem, the more we lower regard for others. That's like a huge miss. But also, when we go down that road of keeping our children constantly comfortable, then every environment they're in the future has to be even more and more and more controlled for them to be able to function okay. And that's exactly the opposite of what we want to do. We want to understand that healthy struggle is actually the engine to growth and maturity, not keeping our children happy and comfortable. I mean, I love the idea of happy children, but happiness is an outcome. It's not a situation we create and give to them. And children that learn to struggle well, I mean, I think about Thomas Paine. He has a great quote. I love the man that can smile in trouble, that can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. Wow. Man, that's the kid I want to raise. He can smile in trouble. He can gather strength from distress, and he can grow brave by reflection. Well, that description gives us this idea that life is bumpy. Life is hard. And do we want the normal brokenness, rigors of life to overwhelm our children, or do we want our children to be able to struggle through them and rise above them? And so looking at that has shaped a great deal of what I do with families. I help them engage their children and say, wait a minute, we're not raising, for an analogy, cruise passengers, making sure they're always happy and having fun. We're actually training the crew. We're raising the crew up to be able to manage and run this ship. I remember several years ago, my son's an Eagle Scout. Now, my son's a young man now. He's 25 years old. But when he was an Eagle Scout, we went on, lived on a sailboat in the Florida Keys for, I don't know, it was 10 days or something. And with a bunch of, I would say, smelly Eagle Scouts. So another leader and I and a bunch of these scouts. And we get on the boat, and the boat captain was a great young guy, and he looked just like Vincent van Gogh. So we named him Vinny. And he said the very first day, he said, all right, guys, my job is to keep you from accidentally killing yourself. Your job is to learn to run the boat. And he said, the quality of your experience is going to be how well you adapt to learning to run this boat. And I thought, man, what a great analogy for raising kids in life. You know, really preparing them to run the boat, preparing them to handle the things in life that we handle as adults, and maybe even better than we handle them as adults. And so that's kind of the framing of really looking at how I got into the space of really the messaging of how we need to raise sturdy kids. And I, as you know, I consult with school systems, I consult with churches, I even do corporate stuff about dealing with the young workforce. How can we train them up to not avoid struggle? Because we deal with that a lot in the young workforce right now. And that's what I see from that. Is an example is a family I had in my office today with a child that came to see me a few months ago, completely out of control. And I talked with the parents and realized that this child has no responsibility. And as the dad said, we're scared to death to ask him to do anything because he flips out. And I said, okay. I said, well, he's winning and we don't negotiate with terrorists. And so we've really been on a journey for a few months of them stepping back and letting their son know, number one, we have clear expectations. And your obligations of responsibility have to happen before you get your freedom and privilege. And we're going to lock in on that simple model that we're raising you to be capable and competent and requiring things of you. And we're going to hold to it. And we're going to hold the gate of life from you. No freedom, no privileges until you begin to operate within this system, no matter how much you fuss, no matter how much you throw tantrums. He was in my office this morning and the mom said, we see daylight. Because he's starting to take on responsibility. He's starting to want to get to freedoms and things, and he's beginning to contribute in his family. And so that process, and the same thing when applied to adults, and I know we're going to talk a lot about that today, the idea of what does it mean to live sturdy as an adult? Uh, I mean, we talked about raising sturdy kids, but where are we possibly off base as adults? And, I think those are the things we're going to talk about. How can we, number one, assess, am I living sturdy? I mean, does that Thomas Paine description describe me or not? Do I crumble at struggle? Do I shy away from everything difficult? Another big one, do I act like little things in life are actually earthquakes when they're not? And so that's part of what we have to look at as adults.
Well, there's so much to unpack there, and it just says even the degree to which you're being called into the corporate world, that all of these issues of how we were raised, how we're raising people these days, is bleeding over into the entirety of culture.
Absolutely.
And there are a couple things that strike me about it. One is, we think so much about this subject of happiness, and the difficulty at some level around this is the issue of short-term happiness versus long-term wellness. And the problem is, if you have a child that's throwing a tantrum and you give them what they want, in the short term, they're going to look at some semblance what looks like happy, and you will be happier in the short term.
Right.
So on both sides, you have the parent who says, I'm scared of what will happen if I say no. And so the same issue comes both of, we're protecting our own short-term happiness and not taking the tougher road, which is this sturdy adult issue. And we're hesitant to make our children, quote, suffer by telling them no or asking them to do something hard, because it just pains us for them to not be happy in the short term. So, short-term instant gratification for us as parents or for our children versus long-term growth and wellness. It's a different framework.
Right. It is. It's a completely different framework, because we can do many things in the moment to give momentary satiation, happiness, pleasure. And that's really what we're talking about more, is momentary pleasure than happiness.
You're right. Yeah.
And, just a current state of feeling good or feeling happy rather than a state of peace, because we can be at peace even in the midst of a storm, because we know what is real, or we know what to trust, or we know capability. We can be at peace in the midst of conflict. But if you think about it this way, often the way I illustrate this to parents, I say, what is the goal in raising your child? And ultimately, this is a way for us to reflect on, what should the adult look like? What should the adult look like? Because we always raise a child with the goal in mind of as an adult. And I run through what history has tried to do, especially my profession that is very therapeutically minded. And my profession, unfortunately, in many cases, has gotten to the point to where our goal is to remove a negative emotion, rather than equip us to live well in this world. And some people push back, and feel happy.
Yeah.
And another way I illustrate that about my profession, and we may have talked about this last time, very simply. If I line up a bunch of professionals in my profession and give them some symptomatology of a child, and I say, what's going on, they will talk and then give me a diagnosis code or two. But if I turn around and say to them, what does a healthy child look like? Sheer panic hits them. They don't know. Because in the field of psychology today, there's not a single underlying agreed upon theoretical framework of what a healthy child looks like. I tell that to parents and they're like, what? I say, yeah, we have 1,000 definitions, and most of them come back to somebody that's happy, not someone that's necessarily equipped. And so I say to them, so you've been chasing some false ideas. So what is your goal? And I give them a very simple goal. It's actually echoed in Scripture in the beginning of the book of James. To me, this passage tells us the process of raising a child to adulthood. And it simply says, consider it pure joy whenever we face trials. So meaning we're going to face trials. That's the real world.
Yeah.
And instead of avoiding and pushing off, consider this as a good, because it develops perseverance. Well, perseverance is the ability to stick with something when it's hard or uncomfortable or difficult. And a little later, it says, perseverance must finish its work so that we are mature. That's the goal. The goal is not a happy child. It's a mature child. And I turn that verse around and say, basically that verse is saying healthy struggle is the engine to growth and maturity. It's what drives it, learning to deal with struggle in a healthy manner. And in my experience, when we learn that early in life, then when we face an unhealthy struggle, we're equipped to go through that as well. But it's important to define maturity. And so think of this as an adult. Maturity is very simply this: the ability to know what's right, what's good, what's true, to know the right things to do, the right ways to live, and the ability to do it when it's difficult, uncomfortable, or I don't feel like it. The ability to live as I should when it's hard. And that ultimately, I would argue, I think it's C.S. Lewis that refers to that courage is every virtue at its testing point.
Ooh,
and that's courage, because that's challenging every virtue. I know what's right to do, but it'd be easy to do the wrong thing. And so it takes courage to say, I will do what's right. I will demonstrate maturity, even though it's not comfortable. For a teenager, even though it's not cool, even though the crowd is doing something else. And so part of assessing where we are as adults is saying, wait a minute, am I doing that? Am I actually able to chart the right path, do the right thing when it's hard, when it's difficult? The line we've always heard is character is doing the right thing when nobody's looking.
Right.
Well, there are plenty of people that do the wrong thing when nobody's looking.
Sure.
And there's a mix, and you can do the right thing by accident. Really, character is defined in this maturity that we do what's right when it's hard, when it's difficult, when it works against popularity and all of those categories. And so I think
that's a whole nother level. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're talking about that. Well, one of the things I'm just aware of, because I've reflected a lot on what you've said about, sturdy kids, in many, many ways, my family was phenomenal raising me and had great parents and, a great life. But I was the youngest of four with, some space between all of the kids. And I think by the time I was coming along, it was just always easier for my parents to have an older, more capable sibling to take care of the hard things. And as long as I was happy and quiet and easygoing, which I was, not much was expected of me. Yeah. And so I think as a consequence, I had to walk this journey of moving towards sturdiness more as an adult than I did naturally through the way my parents raised me. And I don't mean that in any ways negatively about them. It's just kind of an understanding of places and probably the pattern I fell into a little bit in raising my kids. So as we now kind of pivot and say, okay, well, now we can kind of see in this ideal scenario, you start at age 2, you start to build this strength to do the hard things along the way and the right things along the way. So many of us are caught now going, yeah, but that's not the way I was raised. Right. And I maybe have pieces of that, but I really have got a long ways to grow in that. Yeah. So, and of course, I really do think it's, virtually impossible to raise sturdy kids if you're not sturdy yourself. You just don't have the stamina, frankly, to hang in there. So I'd love for you to kind of just talk about what, you've dealt with as many parents, maybe 2 for 1, as you have kids. Oh, yeah. What do you see kind of as the characteristics of people you go, those are some sturdy people, and maybe conversely, the characteristics that show up and you go, okay, this is going to make it really hard for them because they're trying to do something in their kids that they haven't found themselves. Right.
No, I can give you several. And I want to comment on one thing you just said, reflecting on your parents. No one has ever or will ever do it perfectly. Yeah. Ever. We all come into adulthood with pieces, hopefully more good than not.
Yes.
But every child is raised with a mix of good and bad because we're broken people. We are incomplete people. And we are in a cultural moment. We really have been here for about the past 20 years where everybody loves to fall into victimhood. And we love to blame our parents for our shortcomings. And the problem with that is when I get folks that come in and they bemoan their upbringing and things like that, and it could be significantly bad. One of the challenges I tell them right off the bat is this: well, you need to understand something. Our history does not determine who we are at all. Now, it can affect things, but at every stage of life, you have a choice about what you choose to do, what you choose to believe, how you choose to act. And all of that will affect the path. And there are so many people, especially young adults today, that feel like victims. I mean, my goodness, everybody wants a bumper sticker of what they're a victim of today. And that's very deterministic thinking. Unfortunately, that's very Freudian thinking. It's steeped in our field that, every time someone comes in, we have to walk them back through their childhood because it's deterministic. Our history does not determine who we are. It can affect us, but it doesn't determine who we are. As a person of faith, as people of faith, we also know that is anti-faith. I mean, we are new creations. We at any point can change the path in our life. And so I tell people that, I say, because I can't really help you if you keep blaming others for where you are. Because if you're in victim mentality, whether you know it or not, what you're believing is that I'm helpless. And it's really hard to get a person that believes they're helpless to change anything, especially change something that can be hard. And so that's early on, that's a conversation. A lot of times I challenge adults. I say, so you've got to do a little reflecting on really 2 or 3 key things. Number one, are you still blaming other people for your circumstance? Because if you are, we have to deal with that first before you're going to change anything with your child.
Yes.
And we've got to look at, have you processed in a healthy way your history? I look at parents and I think, we're told very clearly, my standard for truth is Scripture, and we're told very clearly we're to honor and respect our parents. That can be confusing to some folks. Does that mean we honor we honor abuse? What if they abused us? Or we respect the fact that they were addicts? No. The theological understanding of that is we honor what's honorable, even if it was only 2 things. We respect what's respectable, and we forgive the rest. And sometimes that list of forgiveness is a whole lot larger than honor or respect. Sometimes it's not. But it's amazing when I ask folks, I say, look, go home, put 3 words across the top of the page: honor, respect, and forgive. And I want you to list, what can you identify in your upbringing that was actually honorable about your parents? What was respectable? And what are the things you realize you need to forgive? And folks come in with any number of things on any of those lists, but now they have a way to say, I'm no longer directed by my history. I've put it in the right categories, and I have done what I need to do with it. And sometimes there are confrontations or conversations that need to happen. A lot of times I have folks go back and have conversations with their parents. And it's amazing how freeing that can be when they go back and talk to a parent and they thank them for things that are honorable and respectable, even though their upbringing was horrible, but they still thank them for the few things that fit in those categories. And then they confront and forgive the things that were not.
Yeah.
And it frees them in many ways. So that's one process. But go ahead.
Well, no, I'm really glad. I mean, that's really an important, corrective that, we're not victims. And the beautiful other side of that is that introduces the possibility and the potential of growth. And the other thing that just strikes me that I do want to say, because we're talking about hard things and we're talking about places that perhaps make many of us, all of us probably in certain ways feel inadequate and as if we've failed. And just as we continue this conversation, I just want to, encourage myself as well as everybody that's listening that this isn't about judgment. This isn't about you are a bad parent or you are bad or you are a weak person or any of that. This is about being real about where we are.
Correct.
And hopeful about where God can take us with no judgment attached to it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, Romans 3:23, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's God saying, why are you so surprised you keep messing up?
Yeah,
I'm telling you,
exactly.
you're broken.
Yeah.
It's a constant experience in your life.
Yeah.
And none of us are going to do this perfectly. It is
Yeah.
always messy. I tell parents all the time, your children leave your home still cooking. They're not finished. You have work to do as best you can, but you're still not going to cover all the bases. But hopefully what you have done is established a relationship, and you can then still be a benefit to your children later in life. That's something else we'll come to in a little while, but I agree.
Yeah.
We've got to understand that is a reality. So that's one category I assess with parents. The second one, and I realize we're kind of shaping this towards parents, but it's true of anyone, even if they don't have children.
Just adults.
Yeah. Just adults is, are you really being run by your emotions or not? One of the biggest obstacles to parents is they allow their emotions to run them. And we have built up this idea that the messaging that's in our culture for the last couple generations, how you feel is the most important part of who you are. We see it everywhere. It's all about being happy. It's all about following your heart, follow your passion, tell your story. But the reality is feelings, when we elevate them to the role of compass, we get in more trouble because our feelings are completely unreliable. Our feelings very simply cannot tell. And we talked about this, I think, at length in the last podcast. But very simply, have you ever been scared by a scary movie? Yes. Have you ever had a bad dream that scared you and you woke up in a fright? Yes. In either circumstance, were you in danger? No. Your feelings can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality. Now, at that point in my office, most parents are like, not sure where to put that. And what I say to them, well, okay, but let me tell you how it affects your ability to parent, to have relationships. It's the fact that you've got to assess, are my feelings running me? So with parents, as an example, I say, you've got to follow a new principle, no parenting above a 5. And they say, what does that mean? I say, imagine a Richter scale of earthquakes, 0 to 10. If it's a 1 or 2, you hear about it on the news. If it's a 3 or 4, you think a big truck drove by the building. If it's a 5, you think something bumped the building and everything starts shaking. Everything above a 5 does damage. Well, we have an emotional Richter scale. Here's our brain. Here are our emotions. Our brain's on top. Anytime our emotions pass, our brain doesn't work. Well, our emotions begin to pass our brain at 5. It's funny though. Most of our parenting is when we're above a 5. Most of when we handle disagreements in relationships is when we're above a 5. Most of the time we have serious conversations, whether it's in the workforce or it's in the family, we're above a 5. And yet that is when we are most distorted. And so that's it. I tell parents all the time, I say, it's as if we interpret it as energy to go do good parenty things. The problem is that's when what comes out is, you're grounded till you're 30, which means they live with you till they're 30. That's not what we want. Yeah. And we always regret it later. Most of the damage we do in relationships, avoiding flat out immoral things, is because we're engaging in high emotion, primarily negative. And so what I tell parents is, understand most things in life are not an emergency. What I tell adults in my office, I say, in the last year, how many emergencies have you had? One of my grandmothers used to say, it's not an emergency unless your head's on fire, you're bleeding out of your eyeball. I mean, just, big time emergency.
That's perspective.
It is. You made me want to ask her, what happened in your childhood that you have that perspective? She had great lines, but the idea is emergency is a big deal. Crisis is a big deal. And so I asked a woman this 2 days ago in my office that came in and was really struggling with a lot of relational things. I said, how many emergencies have you had in the last year? Really? And she thought and she thought and she thought. And then I said, because statistically, for the average adult, it's less than 1 in any given year. And she said, I haven't had one in the last 12 months. I said, okay. I said, how many times did you feel like you were having an emergency? And she went, oh my heavens, hundreds. And I said, I'm just wondering, are most of the difficulties you're having in relationships because of things you did during those 100 times? And she said, absolutely. In a state of elevated emotion. And so what we as adults need to do, whether it's parents or just the average adult, is be able to assess, number one, What really is a big deal? Many things feel like big deals. Many things.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to have the ability to say, wait a minute, anytime I'm experiencing intense, especially negative emotion, I actually need to pause.
Yeah.
Just pause. Because when I pause, I can actually introduce my brain back to the mix. And the best way to do it, a lot of people say, oh, we're going to teach you relaxation therapy. We're going to teach you all these techniques in the moment. I'm sorry. When somebody is jacked up, those don't work.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to cram the emotions down. We can, however, elevate the brain. And we do that by coming up with questions to ask. One of the most effective and the most simple is very simply in the moment, ask yourself, is this really a big deal? Is this really an emergency? Is there evidence that what my feelings are telling me is correct? Now, it feels frustrating, and it may be frustrating, but is it an emergency? If my answer is no, even if I'm still mad about it, then I give myself permission to step back and wait till my brain is back in control. Then if I have to have a conversation, if I have to go deal with a child, if I have to deal with a friend, I do it in a state where I'm calmer and I'm thinking more rationally, not driven by my emotions. That simple step alone changes how we parent. I had parents, this happens a lot. The most famous is a teenage boy that came into my office and he said, something's wrong with my parents. I'd had this conversation with them about 2 weeks prior. I said, never again engage above a 5. Walk away 100 times if you have to. Never talk to your child again unless it's an emergency when you're elevated. The dad acknowledged that was going to be very hard for him. But apparently they had worked on it beautifully. Teenage boy comes in my office, I think he was 15, and he said, is my dad dying? And I said, what? He said, my dad's dying, isn't he? I said, no, your dad's not dying. Is it my mom? My mom's dying. I said, no. I had to get his parents to come in the office and explain the homework I gave them so that he understood the difference he was seeing. Changing that in a family, changing it in a relationship is, in my experience, the most significant single change we can make to change the environment. Think about it in a marital relationship or dating relationship. Never again engage each other when you're jacked up. Say, I'm jacked up. I need a minute. Let me calm down, think through this. Let me not say in heated emotion what I don't need to say. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, the truth comes out when you're really jacked up. No, it does not.
Yeah.
When our emotions pass
not
our
when
brain,
it's above a 5.
Right. When our emotions pass our brain, we are irrational.
Mm-hmm.
And we're speaking out of raw emotion, which is rarely in line with reality. So that's another piece I tell folks. I say, because you've got to get yourself in line emotionally, understanding most things are not an emergency, understanding your feelings should never dictate what you do and say. You've got to get that in check before you can ever begin doing something differently with a child. By the same token, in relationships, go ahead.
No, and I can say we talked a little bit beforehand about, my 40 years of, running businesses. And, in the running of the businesses, I would say in 10 to 20% of the time were the problems that I had with employee a competence problem, and 80% it was on the other side. So the very principle that you're talking about was usually the issue that I had to deal with as an employer.
Yep.
And that was the employee was not able to manage what was going on inside of them, and it spilled out.
Yep.
And so, the workplace, and I'm sure you've seen this, in your consulting, the workplace, the ability to go to do a job, even in a hard place or even in a slightly dysfunctional place, the ability to keep that Richter scale at 5 or less, which is a strength of character to get that.
It absolutely
is so incredibly life-giving and I guess death-defying, so to speak.
Well, it's funny. In the corporate world, there are many different things. I train teams on how to handle conflict. I do a lot of work with conflict resolution. And when they're dealing with hostile team members that just have an angst or an axe to grind and they're having a meeting, here's an example of just one thing that creates a pause. They come in the room and they sit down, and before you start, because they are raring, they're ready to go, they're ready to pounce, you simply say, hey, hold up, I'm going to get a glass of water. Would you like a glass of water? Most of the time they'll say, well, sure. Then the next thing that happens is you're serving them, bringing them a glass of water, and they're saying, thank you. It brings the emotion down. Now, it doesn't always keep it down, but it immediately begins to change a piece of the environment because you're demonstrating what we call hospitality. I mean, just so many things we can do to create these moments of pause, because it's amazing how what we do in conflict, I mean, I hate to say this, tells a lot about who we are. C.S. Lewis has a great line. I think it's in a couple of different things he wrote. He says, surely what a man does when he's taken off his guard is the best indicator of what sort of man he is. What we do when we are thrown off, what we do when it's hard, what we do when it's difficult, how we respond to that says a lot about who we are. And so often I ask folks I work with, I say, so just reflect this next week. Who are you based on that definition? When things are hard, things are difficult, somebody cuts you off in traffic, you're telling people who you are. Who are you? And the stories I get back are hysterical because people really pay attention to that and track it. And of course, the next commentary is, wait a minute, that's not who I want to be. So I say, okay, that's our work.
Well, one of the places I think that I've learned this lesson is, going on 45 years of marriage, I've realized that one of the most critical decisions that I can make in our relationship is when we discuss something.
Yeah.
And that when waiting for the moment when we can both enter into the space in the right frame of mind and not into the space in the height of emotion, when we're rested, when we're able to give focus, when there's not a rush to things, all of those magnify the possibility of the right kind of conversation and conclusions coming about. And that often takes patience because we want to deal with it when it's right there. Right. And there's, in a sense, nothing wrong with that, but it's not the most effective.
Right. It isn't. And that's where we get caught up in the pressure of, whether we know it or not, we're buying into something as an emergency. It has to be dealt with right now. And we let that shove us into conflict when we're not ready to handle it in a healthy way. And we have no better description of this struggle, and I think it's a good struggle, than in marriage. Two incomplete people that are told to stitch their complete life together and be one in everything. That's an unbelievable journey. It's a wonderful, brilliant journey. But my wife would attest, we're still working on it. It's a learning process constantly. Yeah. And the thing, and this is another principle I tell people all the time, adults, I say, so think about conflict in general. And we've talked a little bit about it with this, but another principle is this. If you're really being a healthy person, then in any conflict, what is the most important thing? The issue at hand or the relationship? And not lose perspective of that. It's the relationship. We know flourishing in life is actually about correctly ordered and oriented relationships.
Yeah.
It's not about winning trophies. It's not about money. It's not, I speak to teenagers all the time and all over the country. I speak to about 10,000 a year. And one of the conversations we have, I said, what is it you're chasing to claim your identity? And the funny thing is we as adults do the same thing. And I give them this idea of way to think about it. I said, think of 4 Ps. Are you chasing popularity? Are you chasing performance? Are you chasing position, like being a captain, being a president of the class? Or are you chasing what really matters? So it's popularity, performance, position, or possessions. Yeah. What is it you're chasing? Because every one of them comes up light. None of them were fulfilling. I recently was reflecting on doing a little research on some different things for a book, and I reflected on Lance Armstrong. The story of Lance Armstrong. Yeah. Phenom. But then when it broke that he was doping or other things or whatever, and then many people after him, he had everything, but he was chasing the 4 Ps in some way. He was
Right.
chasing all those things, and none of those fulfill healthy identity. Those
Sure.
have nothing to do with a flourishing life. And of course, my challenge to these individuals is, really, to talk to teenagers or adults, if you want to understand who you understand who you are by actually being selfless and serving other people. We know
Boy,
that's supported in
countercultural. Yeah.
it is. It's counterculture. We see a great example, and I don't know if we talked about this last time or not. I think it's Mark 9. We get this wonderful example, the disciples walking along the road coming to Jesus at Capernaum, and Jesus is in a house in Capernaum waiting for him. And I think God has a great sense of humor. And it makes sense if you understand who the disciples are. I ask people all the time, how old were the disciples? And we go, 30s, 40s. No. We know that Christ was in his 30s. Peter most likely was late 20s and married. The rest of the disciples were between 13 and 19 years old. So we have, walking along the road, a bunch of adolescent males. So the conversation makes sense. Their whole conversation was, who's the best? I'm better than you are. I mean, that's a typical male locker room conversation. I'm better than you are. I'm the best. I'm going to sit at the right hand of God. I mean, all this stuff. They get to Jesus, and he's great. He's just like, hey, what were you guys arguing about? Because he knows. And they quietly sit down, and he says this unbelievable thing. They're arguing about identity. They're trying to claim identity. And he gives this simple answer. If you want to be first, you must be last and servant to all. Very simply, he tells them the secret to figuring out who you are is by serving, not by trying to claim any of these other things. And so that's the other piece I talk to folks about as adults, whether it's with their kids or not. It's, are you a vital member of your community? Whether it's a community of your marriage, a community of your friends, a community of your church, and do you have the spirit of servanthood? Even simply, I ask dads all the time when they come home, because it's more often dads coming home than moms, but if mom's the primary breadwinner, then mom's coming home. And I ask dads this question. I say, when you walk in your house, are you bringing panic or peace when you walk in the door?
Yeah.
And that right there, you have an opportunity to serve, or you have an opportunity to stoke chaos. And it's the same thing in our community. If we're active in a church, if we're in our marriage and our friendships, are we of a mindset of serving those that we're in those relationships with? Yeah. That's actually who we figure out who God has made us to be. And that's how we begin to understand our true identity. And that eclipses any of the other 4 Ps in every category. But it's amazing, because in my office, when I get people to chart that, I'll have an adult come in that's struggling, and we walk through a lot of this. The emotions are a huge part of it, understanding what's a big deal and what's not. But when we get to what's your identity, and I throw just 4 Ps out as a way of starting conversations, they'll get engrossed in that because they realize they're chasing any number of those. Maybe not intentionally, but they've bought into that this is what matters. Making enough money, having the right cars, being popular, other people liking me. And every time it comes up short.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. So are there any other major characteristics? And then I want to kind of jump over into what do you see as the practices that can help move us? Because often I feel like the practices aren't necessarily the direct things of saying, I'm just going to be less emotional. They're, they're practices that we can, and habits that we can begin to employ in our life that will have that slow effect of changing us. So are there any other characteristics? And then if not, I'm sure there are tons, but
Well, there are, but one other jumps out of me, and it's in line with the things we've talked about, is really shaping how you view the idea of struggle just in and of itself. Yeah. Because we're in a culture right now that says avoid struggle. And we at every turn try to avoid struggle. We try to avoid struggle with our children, so we end up keeping them happy. We try to avoid struggle in our extended family, so we remove ourselves. I mean, it's amazing. We're in a culture the last 20, 30 years. I deal with something really in the last 20 years more than I've ever dealt with before. Families that have just discarded their elderly adults because they may have different views. And it's very culturally chic to say, oh, I've got to hold my boundaries, or that's my story, so I'm cutting you off because you're, quote, toxic. We have to understand that struggle resolves issues, stitches us together, is part of restoration. And so I tell folks, do not be afraid of struggle. Do not be afraid of difficult conversations. Do not be afraid of difficult topics. That doesn't mean go find somebody to argue about politics with. It just means don't be afraid of the things that we need to do to maintain and manage relationships. If you think of leadership in any realm of leadership, whether it's corporate world, whether it's a church, whether it's a school, whether it's in parenting, leadership in all of those has two common characteristics. The first is leadership is to the benefit of those we lead, is to the benefit of the followers. So then by its nature, it's self-sacrificial. And a big part of what that self-sacrifice is we're willing to be uncomfortable and do the hard work for the benefit of the relationship. And we're in a culture today that says relationships are expendable. You can always find another one. When we see that in marriage, we see that in friendships. And we're really devaluing not only the other people, but we're also saying we don't have much value because they're free to discard us too.
It's so true. And I've seen almost a new development, come about in the last 10 years, and that's now taken to such an extreme that we're willing to functionally ghost one another.
Oh, exactly.
Where we we don't tell them, we're out of relationship. We just stop communicating. We won't respond to texts or emails. We won't answer phone calls if anybody uses their phone anymore.
What's that?
Yeah, exactly. But we just simply stop talking because even talking is entering into some difficulty.
And I would suggest that is a demonstration of your own personal frailty. It really is. And that's the other piece through all of what we've already talked about. Really just understand that struggle can be the agent of growth. There's no restoration without struggle. There's no salvation without struggle. Yeah. I mean, there's no growth without struggle. And yet we're in a culture that says we should be pursuing everything comfortable. I mean, again, I'll go to the workforce of the young adult. It's amazing how many folks are having to deal with young adults that always feel offended.
Yeah.
And my response to them is, in essence, kind of get over it. The world's broken. People have you ever offended someone else? Yeah, but I didn't mean it. Well, then maybe they didn't mean it either. Or even if they did, who cares? They're not in control of your life. But we've lost those emotional calluses that allow us to function well. So I think that aspect is key too, is really how we view struggle, and we don't always run away from it. And so then, but if we pivot and we think about what do we do with some of this, a formula I use in most of the workshops I give, just as we work through things, is can we correctly identify the problem? Can we correctly identify the principle that should direct the solution? And then can we correctly identify some practical application? So if we use that formula, if we correctly identify the problem, that we're chasing our emotions and letting our emotions run us, then what principles should guide how we look at that? Well, number one, the principle that our feelings are unreliable, and understanding that, so they're never to be in the role of a compass. So then 3, what's a practical application? We talked about it already. From now on, pay attention to your emotions. And I tell folks all the time, pay attention to when you're at 4 and rising. Everybody has a tell. They sweat, they get cold, they clench their hands, they clench their toes, their voice changes, whatever it is. Figure out your tell. And from now on, when you hit it, take a pause, take a break, step away.
Because, and so you're not saying, stuff down your emotions and
not at all.
Pretend emotions don't exist and don't listen to them. They don't have something to offer. You're saying have an element of control, listen to them, and don't allow them to rule.
Yeah. Take a moment and evaluate. I mean, emotions are not to run us. Emotions have unbelievable roles in who we are. I mean, I'll give you a couple. Number one, emotions give us depth and meaning in relationships. You go through something beautiful with a person, it stitches you together. Funny enough, you go through something difficult with a person, it stitches you together.
Absolutely.
Emotions connect us to the physical world of God's creation through things like beauty and awe and wonder. I mean, my goodness, when I see a new snowfall, I'm giddy. I mean, it freaks some people out, I know, but it's amazing how we are stimulated by the
Yeah.
beauty that God has created around us. So emotions are part of what God gives us as a gift of experience and all of these wonderful things. But
Yes.
they are not to run us, because since we are incomplete, broken people, they do not always align with truth.
Yes.
So it's simply
Right.
saying, hey, anytime we have intense ones, back up, give a moment, and evaluate.
Yeah.
You still may have a problem that you then need to go deal with, but now you're in a better state of mind to deal with it. Sometimes you'll find your emotions line up with reality. Sometimes they don't. Emotions are more often in error when it's negative.
Right. One of the places I've found that's helpful for me in this process of learning and growing through our emotions is the practice of journaling.
Yeah.
Because often I don't catch it in the moment because the emotions come, we
Right.
feel them, an event happens, and then we get on. But often, maybe the next morning, as I sit and reflect, I can look back and I can enter back into a situation with an element of objectivity
Right.
that is
Without
able
without
to,
the intense emotion.
yeah, exactly. And say, okay, that was not my best. Let's learn from it and move on. And then if you do that as a regular practice,
Right.
then you begin to all of a sudden get a little bit ahead of the emotions
That's
more
right.
often.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, and what I see with patients and folks I deal with, whether it's in counseling or coaching or life coaching things or athletes, is when they learn to begin doing this, they don't, at some point it gets habituated.
Right.
And in the moment, their head's already jumping in going, this is not a big deal. Keep your cool.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And it never gets that elevated
Yeah.
because they're already practicing a better perspective.
Right.
So another issue, if we think about a practice, if we know we're all broken, incomplete people, we know our parenting's not going to be perfect. We know we're not always going to be perfect in relationships. We know our emotions get in the way and they're going to cause chaos at different times. The principle is the idea that flourishing is correctly ordered and oriented relationships, and we have to value the relationship over the issue. So the practice is we have to make sure we're people that practice confession and forgiveness. Because forgiveness is actually I think of marriages, forgiveness is actually the glue of marriage. It's not doing it all perfectly. It's not always doing the right things. It's not always saying the right things. I mean, there are many good habits in marriage, many that I coach people on and direct people on. But the glue is forgiveness. Because whenever the fracture happens, it stays fractured until the glue is present, until that forgiveness comes in. And that takes humility on our part, the ability to acknowledge when either I was wrong, or maybe not wrong, hurtful, rude, foolishly inappropriate, whatever it may be. It doesn't mean we had a bad intent, but it's the idea that if we have hurt another, we should seek restoration in whatever it may be.
Right. So it's confession and forgiveness both towards the other person and towards yourself.
Right.
Because I can't let go of my desire to be right unless I admit it. And
right.
if I'm not willing even to forgive myself, even though God has forgiven me,
That's right.
then I've stepped into a wrong place that just becomes a continuing spiral.
And in practice, folks that fail to confess and seek forgiveness from the person they've offended are stuck with that unforgiveness on themselves.
Yes.
Because they've not taken a corrective action.
Right.
The corrective action is go to the person, go through a process of restoration, which is confession, forgiveness. Now you've taken the corrective action. So when it comes up again in your own head, because it does, we never let stuff right away, let go. We can remind ourselves, wait a minute. Yes, I don't like that. Yes, that was horrible. Yes, whatever. But I've taken the correct step. I've taken the correct action. And when we put that process in action, it's amazing how easy it is for us to get back to where we need to be. And so I think that's a key part of this as well. A third thing I would say is asking ourselves.
One more thing in there, because this is just all so good. One of the things that I've I've written about that, I just believe so strongly, is that there's a place that's short of forgiveness that we need to learn, and that's the practice of forbearance.
Right.
It's those small things that seem to be not so big as to warrant that I need to make an issue of it or
Right.
issue forgiveness, but yet they niggle at you. They
Yeah.
get at you, and if you don't address them, if you don't take the specific action of I'm going to let that go, I am no longer
Right.
going to count that against the person.
Right.
They are free from that. I am free from that.
Yeah.
Then it's those small things that snowball that then become something that can be very problematic. And all you have to go back on is, well, yeah, but you did this tiny thing 50 times and
Right.
it's blown up to this.
Yeah. We actually build a case,
Yes, exactly.
but we build it with little things, but
Yes.
nonetheless, it becomes a massive thing because we built a case. What I tell couples all the time, and it's another part of this, you're very right. It's one thing when we've been greatly hurt, when we've really been wronged, that's one thing. But there's the other category, and the other category is we're imperfect people.
Right.
So we are going to rub each other. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And what I tell people is that one of the key aspects of a healthy marriage is giving benefit of the doubt to motive
Yes.
or intent.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. If my wife says something to me and I hear it as a little rude, I'm immediately getting defensive. I'm like, well, why are you talking to me like that? And I'm immediately assuming she wants to hurt me or she's thinking negative about me or something. And that's where we've really got to guard ourselves and say, wait a minute, I'm going to be a little less easily offended. I'm going to realize that rubbing is normal. And there could be many reasons why something sounded the way it did, or wasn't exactly right, or wasn't completely clear. But there's an action we can take. And taking this action helps it. I tell folks all the time, if you hear something or something is done and it's one of those things, it's not clearly a wrong, but it just grates at you and you see it coming from the person, before you take offense, offer help. Because it clarifies. So if if someone says something to me and it comes across a little rude, before I'm like, oh, God, what's going on? I say, hey, seems like something's off. Can I help? It opens the door for them to clarify and say, oh, no, nothing at all. I was just doing something else. And okay, it's non-issue. Or if they really are, if there's a frustration or a struggle, it brings it to light.
Yeah.
And you've taken a stance where you've leaned into help rather than taking it personal, which is distance from the other person. And so that's another characteristic. It's really deciding, if I know a flourishing life is correctly connected relationships, am I actually cultivating those? Mm-hmm. Or am I just existing in them? So I think about marriage. It should be a daily cultivation of the relationship. But that's not always how we think about it. I use, I'll give you a great example. So I play in a bunch of different golf tournaments, not because I'm a good golfer, because I sponsor things. And several years ago, I was a guy, they reached out and asked me to play, and I couldn't put a team in, but I'm like, I'll come play because they always need filler. And so I show up and they put me on this one team, and I know the guys on the team, and I am in this cart with this one guy, and he sees me coming and he's like, yes. And I'm like, I have no idea why he's excited. He's a scratch golfer and I am nowhere near a scratch golfer. Okay. So I'm like, I don't understand why he is so excited that I'm on his team. And I get in the cart and he's like, man, I am so pumped that you're in my cart. I need to talk to you about my marriage. And I'm like, oh for heaven's sake.
Oh gosh.
I'm like,
that's painful.
I've got 4.5 hours. And I'm like, okay. And I chat and I said, but I get to ask you about golf. Because he's a scratch golfer and he didn't used to be a scratch golfer. He's like, okay, no problem. I mean, we haven't teed off on the first box and he is unloading on all these struggles and different things. And I know his wife. And so he's going on and on and on. So we're driving down the first fairway and he stops for a second. We're actually coming to the green. He's like, well, what do you think? And I said, well, let me ask you, I need to ask you a question first. He's like, okay. I said, how'd you become a scratch golfer? 3 years ago, you were not a scratch golfer. Oh man. I put the time in. I got a coach. I started going to the range so many days a week. I've been logging this many hours at the course. I got a simulator in my garage. And he's going on and on and on and on about all this effort he's put forth in developing his game. And it's paid off. And so my comment to him was, man, that really paid off. You saw results from your effort. He went, yeah. And I said to him, I said, well, have you ever thought that maybe if you put the same effort into the relationship with your wife, it might be better? And he went, what? I said, I'm just saying you have a wonderful demonstration of when you put intentional effort into cultivating something, you typically get a better outcome. Are you intentionally cultivating the relationship with your wife by expenditure of time, energy, and money? Because that's what you did with golf. And he was quiet for a couple holes, but that's what he needed to hear. He wasn't cultivating the relationship that mattered to him.
And you got the win of a couple of holes of silence.
I did. I got silence. And he kind of laid off after that.
But that's a great story.
Yeah. And it's, and I've had those conversations with many athletes, with business owners, that we can put our heads in the wrong places for good reason. For good reason. Yeah. I tell husbands all the time. I was speaking to a group of dads out west about a month and a half ago. I had about 100 dads. And I said, how many of you're here, so you really want the best for your families. How many of you really have bought in and owned this idea that you are going to go out and you are going to slay the lions for the benefit of your family? And they all raised their hands. And I said, and how many of you then think when you come home, you're off duty? And they all start laughing. I said, okay, you're only doing half the job. Because you're owning the part of being a provider, but you're not owning the part of being an integral part of one with your wife. Yes. The rest of the day, the rest of the time. And then we had a big conversation about that.
Well, I think it points to kind of, I think that last characteristic that you said that becomes foundational of the willingness to do hard things, and that growth and relationships, the workplace, parenting, family, all of these are hard work. And the beginning place is to say, I'm willing to do hard work. I'm willing to put the time in and the effort and to enter into hard places, hard conversations. And if you have a block to begin with there, then you can't get past starting point on the other things. And so, I think it kind of comes full circle to the whole sturdy conversation, which is, that willingness to do hard things in service to a larger goal of who you are becoming and doing the right thing. So, it's a kind of beautiful circle to the whole thing. So, I feel like you have hit on so many things. And I think my encouragement for those listening would be to take all of this and to step back and be quiet for a moment and say, what is it that I need to hear in these messages? And what is it that I need to do and to act on and to face and to confess in order for the growth to happen, whether it's growth, as a parent, whether it's growth as an employer or an employee, as a spouse, as a friend. These are all places, and they're all places of relationship that we need to grow in. And so, in the midst of this, I guess my encouragement would be, to begin by some honest reflection, confession, about some of the hard places that, we need to grow.
Yeah. I would say that no matter where you are, just be honest about where you are, and then pick one thing to start with. Yeah. Do one small thing well, rather than trying to do many poorly. Just pick one. Pick one small thing, do it well for a season, then reflect again. So what's next? And it doesn't take long for that to gain speed, because it's a whole lot easier to go downhill in the right direction than to try to climb uphill in the wrong direction. I mean, we will gain speed as we do this, because so many things dovetail back to one another. But I tell folks, just start small. Start small. And in my experience, the beginning place for folks is usually that emotional piece of learning to step back and acknowledge most things are not an emergency, so that I'm no longer being driven by my emotions. As we do better with that, then we're better able to reconcile our past. We're better able to deal with our children. We're better able to navigate relationships because our emotions are no longer in control.
That's great, man. So many good things here. You have some phenomenal resources, available to people, and your practice and everything is really helpful. I'd love for you to just tell for those who would like to just hear more of kind of what you teach about, or the resources, or how to connect. How might people connect with you or your resources?
Well, my website is livesturdy.com. And we're trying to cultivate more and more resources on there. It is not a high-end professional website. So there's always good stuff on there, and sometimes stuff doesn't work, but that's okay. I'm not in the website business. One of the links on there is podcasts. I've done so many podcasts with folks all over the nation, and we try to capture. We're behind, but there's a bunch on there. And a good friend of mine runs a podcast in the classical education world called Base Camp Live.
Okay.
His name's Davies Owens. I've probably done 50 podcasts with him over the last many years. And if you go to his website, search bar, and put in my name, you'll get like 50 podcasts on all of these topics and different things. In May or June, I'm not sure the date yet, I'm waiting to hear back, I will have a book out called Raising Sturdy Kids. We're doing final copy editing right now. Soon as that's out and we have any information or pre-order or whatever, I'll get it to you, Tommy, and you can post it. But that's meant to be a resource really for parents. And it looks at a lot of what we talked about last time. Just, what are we chasing that we shouldn't be chasing? And what really should we be chasing? And how can we practically do it? How can we raise sturdy kids? And that's meant to be a tool for parents that every child needs, regardless of where they are in life, regardless of difficulties they may face. It's foundational principles and practices for raising sturdy kids. So those are a handful of resources.
Well, this is fantastic. We'll definitely put all of those in the show notes. And when your book comes available, I'd love to, tell people about it. Because I do think that there is a absolutely interconnection between the difficulties and the struggles we have raising children and the difficulties we have just being a sturdy adult in the other places. And sometimes the light that is shown on our parenting kind of exposes other things that need the equal attention. And that was kind of the purpose of this particular episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to me most of the time after I've worked with a family, parents say, we're really the ones that had to do the work. The child wasn't really the problem. We had to get some things straight. And I said, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And when you got some things straight, you were better able to do what you needed to do with your kids.
Yeah. Well, this is fantastic, Keith. Thank you for your time. I think we covered just so much, incredibly good things that I'm going to be reflecting on. So appreciate it so much. And you and I have talked about, we're going to
we'll do another one soon.
Yeah. And we're going to have a golf one that we're going to do together for my Links for Life podcast, because these things also, ironically, not so ironically, show up on the golf course.
They do. Now let's clarify. It will not be anything about golf instruction.
Yes. That's good. I'm all about it. That's right. We'll save that.
I don't have much to offer.
Your scratch golfer friend.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thanks again so much. Everybody, please share this episode because I think this is just right at the crux of what we want to do to grow in the various areas of our life and in the things that matter most, which when we come back to it, it's our relationship to God, our relationships to others. So please share this episode, and thanks for joining us in this episode of Space for Life.